Morning guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. While many are discussing the Singapore Grand Prix as a huge weekend for Max Verstappen, the same is clearly true of Lando Norris as well. Now 25 points behind his championship rival on paper, Oscar Piastri, but Lando under major fire today, claiming that Max Verstappen's Red Bull has actually been pretty damn good all season long. The evidence though of our eyes and ears this year do not seem to align with this yet again. It feels like McLaren and Lando making some excuses for if this year's title does not go their way. Lots of reaction as well. Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Plenty to get into around the Singapore Grand Prix. These were the pictures there just a couple of hours ago. So there have been some storms. The chance of that continuing through the weekends is likely, but not especially likely to actually affect the race times. We saw some of the likely weather forecast over the last couple of days. It appears that Saturday there's a chance, Friday there's a chance of rain, but it's likely to happen slightly earlier in the day. Probably won't be so effective, but it is clear that the track is going to not be especially rubbing in during the weekend if we do get some serious rain, even outside of the time that the drivers are actually at the track. Pretty much a year ago, by the way, from all the FIA drama that happened with Max Verstappen. You guys remember when he refused to talk in the press conference, then he held his own press conference. The FIA wasn't very happy with that. That was this time last year. But a crucial circuit for Max, because this has been doing the rounds today. Max, as we know, has won at every single circuit on this year's calendar, with the exception of Singapore. Even Max himself has said that, look, it's unfinished business. He wants to win. This weekend's Red Bull believe they have a car which is now capable of doing so, although Lando apparently thinks they've had that car all along. But that may not be quite what we have seen this year. Just another couple of updates. It was this time last year as well, where Daniel Ricciardo set the all-time lap record in Singapore with his final ever lap in Formula 1. And Hamilton, despite a challenging season, one of his better records in terms of qualifying streak does come at this circuit. Over the last few years, his record here is pretty exemplary. So can he continue that in the Ferrari? That is a good question. Is the Ferrari going to do anything solid this weekend? That is another important question, but far from a guarantee given the performance of that car so far this season. But as we know, back in 2023, when Red Bull dominated, this was the weekend where Ferrari and Carlos Sainz got their win, as it was back then. Another couple of updates on the driver market. Pietro Fittipaldi has signed with Cadillac. Obviously not as a starting driver. That is going to be Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez. We also know that they have Colton Herta as part of the program as well. He will do F2 next year. Pietro Fittipaldi is also joining as well as a test driver, working with the development of the team's 2026 car through sim testing and full Grand Prix simulations. So he's part of the program. What does that mean for a Mick Schumacher, a Yuki Tsunoda, some of the other drivers that would like to get potentially a test or reserve seat at Cadillac? Maybe there's still a door open there, but with every driver that signs, that likelihood reduces, of course. Couple of things on Mercedes. So George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, Toto has said that they will drive for Mercedes next year, and I think there is a 99+% chance that they will. But things are a little bit confusing why we don't have anything on this yet. I mean, even any of the days for the last months, they could have announced something. Now, there were rumours that Antonelli might get kicked. There was some talk that Carlos Sainz might get brought in. All kind of 0.1% chance reality things. But Toto did say, this is what he said. He confirmed the lineup. He already said it, that they're going to be on the team next year and that there will be contracts, there will be announcements when the time comes. But we know that George would really like a 2+1 year deal or something longer than a year because he wants some protection against Max Verstappen, of course, understandably so. Toto is not going to give him it. And that's been the debate today as to, well, hang on a second here, George Russell's contract is getting a bit strange, right? Again, it's like with Yuki at Red Bull. He's had a couple of decent weekends lately. The Dutch Grand Prix wasn't tragic. He performed okay there compared to expectations. The Baku Grand Prix was pretty good. It was his best performance in Red Bull so far. But in the Netherlands, Hadjar got a podium. And at Baku, he was outplaced by Lawson, right? So every time that Yuki does something quite good, it seems like he's still getting a little bit overshone by others. It's not like Yuki's done well, but every time that he's looked okay, certainly compared to where he was a few rounds ago, and we'll see more of that in a second, he's getting overshadowed. George is kind of the same. Like, anytime George has a great weekend, Max is somehow doing better, which again puts George in a bit of a difficult spot. But his contract situation is a little bit unclear. The key thing I wanted to say is that Toto's been quite clear that Kimi is going to stay. Kimi's not going anywhere, definitely is going to stay as part of the team. There were rumours that he was going to get loaned out to like Alpine or Williams or something, but Toto said that's complete nonsense. So he has definitively shut down all rumours that Kimi is going to be somewhere else other than Mercedes. But he's not said much still about George, right? Which is still a little bit interesting. The only recent thing he said about George was that if you're a driver and you want a 2-year deal, that shows mental weakness. So I think it's pretty clear what Toto is trying to accomplish there. I imagine George will hold on to a certain extent, but realistically, what other options does George actually have? So enjoy your thoughts on that in the comments. This is also interesting. McLaren, after winning the Constructors last year, they made a profit. They got themselves into the black, but also Zach Brown apparently earned $50 million. And not a bad year for Zach Brown. And, well, to be honest, with the amount of sponsors that he's helped bring into McLaren and the turnaround that he's been a part of, you can understand why. The McLaren has been, undisputedly, the fastest car of this year and, frankly, last year for a large portion as well. Max is still in with a sniff of this year's driver's title, although it is very much an outside chance. And there is good reason to believe that Lando is still potentially well positioned. But the question with Lando, as ever, is mentality. It's not about skill or speed. It's all mental with Lando. And he should have in Baku, but he should certainly now be tasting blood in the water, as it were. Oscar looked vulnerable in Baku, right? That was the weekend, Baku, where he had such a phenomenal victory, right? I mean, I remember making the video after Baku 2024 saying, look, this weekend proves to me and many others that Piastri does have the minerals to be a championship contender. Yeah, I still had questions on Piastri's raw pace compared to Lando at the time, but his victory in Baku last year, until to a certain extent we found out about the Mini DRS and the fact that their car probably wasn't really that legal, but it showed he had what it takes last year, Baku. And I think many saw last year's Azerbaijan Grand Prix and said, you know what, this Piastri guy is seriously one to watch if he's in a title battle. We then know what he's done this year. But a year on from that, has one of the most disastrous weekends you're ever going to see from a championship contender, let alone a championship leader. So Lando really should be thinking, okay, yeah, maybe I didn't execute as well as I could have done in Azerbaijan, but maybe Piastri is folding a little bit under some of the pressure that comes with being the overwhelming championship favourite. And, you know, people consider Piastri to be the Iceman, the Ice Boy, whatever you want to say, unflappable. That pressure can get to drivers. I mean, let's not forget the way that Verstappen was driving when the title was very much doable in 2021. You know, Verstappen was driving in ways that he would not have done, I think, if he was already a world champion. So you do get this, certainly with new drivers that aren't world champions yet. But Max knows what he's doing here, right? So I think that's why there's a few interesting things to say on Lando. But Max says, look, Yuki has tried his best. Fair play to Max, because he defended Lawson, he defended Perez, defended Yuki. Of course, there's always this cynical part of me that says, well, of course he's going to big up his second driver, because then it makes him look even better. And, you know, I think there is a little bit of that in there. But as Max says, throughout the season, we've been going a little bit left and right with the setup. I feel like maybe we're starting to be a bit more stable with the behaviour of the car. And I hope that that will help both of the drivers because, yeah, they're not going to win the Constructors. But Max would really like Yuki to be in the hunt to some extent. So he can defend against Piastri, defend against Norris. In an ideal world, Max finishes first, Yuki second, right? And the McLarens are third and fourth. That means he can close the gap faster. Though that is pretty unlikely. It's not always easy to jump in a car when it's unpredictable, he says, or not doing what you want. Then when the field is so close, 1 or 2 tenths between us, you can be out in Q1 or Q2. It's a very, very competitive field at the moment. So hopefully now with the coming races, the car being in a more stable window will help both drivers. So everyone knows Red Bull have made big progress with their car from not only the start of the season, but certainly the middle of the season and beyond. For the first half of the season, certainly for the first 7-8 rounds, there were plenty of upgrades. McLaren brought several iterative upgrades to their car that made it even faster. For the last few rounds, they've not done that much. Red Bull have done a lot. They've found something on setup, but also they've brought a couple of tweaks to the floor, a couple of tweaks to the front wing, some of which Yuki destroyed with this crash in Imola. But largely, I think even the Silverstone upgrade they brought, that was very evident. I mean, what Max did in Silverstone getting pole there, yes, his downforce was too low for when it eventually rained on the Sunday, but on the Saturday, he was able to keep just as high of a speed in some of the faster corners with lower rear wing. It was clear that it seemed anyway that, yeah, there was a bit of Max Verstappen magic in there. But the car, the Red Bull, was once again capable of probably having the best floor on the grid. And we've seen that now be, let's say, exacerbated on over the last few rounds. That's the way that Max looks at it. He's confident at Red Bull. He says it feels like a family again. We've talked about the future quite openly. You do it like a family. So all of a sudden he's feeling quite confident. But the reason why Lando Norris is under fire today is because of these comments. So, and I don't really understand why McLaren do this, right? And it is Lando more than Oscar for sure, but it is also McLaren full stop. They seem to be still somehow playing this whole underdog gimmick where they're like, well, actually, we're not that quick. Ferrari are quite competitive. Red Bull are very good. Red Bull are even faster. Max is actually the favourite for the championship. I mean, they've not said this, right? But the fact that Andrea Stella said that Max is a very serious threat for the championship, where realistically he never should be. The McLaren has been by far the faster car compared to the Red Bull for the vast majority of this season. And yes, right now that could have changed. It's plausible, Helmut Marko said it, that he thinks that maybe the Red Bull now is the quickest car again. And maybe it should be. They've brought so many upgrades and they've committed far more to this year's championship than other teams have. But they've also learned on setup and some other things where they need to go. But Lando Norris, with 14 rounds of last season to go, let's just put this into context. Last year, 14 rounds to go, Lando was 69 points behind Max. He ended the season roughly the same amount of points behind Max, despite having a better car during pretty much all of that time period. This year, Max has 7 rounds to go in what is bare minimum an equal car, you would imagine. I guess there's some debate on that. But he's got the same points deficit. So we'll see what Max can do, right? And that was obviously last year Max versus Lando. This year it's Max versus Piastri. But Lando says this, Max was winning races already at the beginning of the season. He could have won round 1. I think he was pretty close to winning other races. The whole season, they have been quick. Now, look, I don't know if this is the Orwellian, the party asks you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. But, am I getting gaslit here or what's going on? Because, I remember quite distinctly multiple races where the Red Bull clearly did not have anywhere near the pace of the McLaren. Now, look, yes, did they start the season with Max being competitive? Yes, they did. Was his car ever as quick as the McLaren? No, it was not. Did they go through a period in the middle of the season when some of their upgrades didn't work and the other teams had taken strides where that car was pretty much nowhere for several rounds? Absolutely right. So the idea that they've been quick the whole season and that, I don't know, it just appears to me on paper that once again McLaren and Lando are playing this whole, well, yeah, if we do lose to Max, then it's not really me who's underperformed. It's actually that, yeah, Max has done a great job and the car has been quick. It's like, that shouldn't be the mindset, right? Like, I think the mindset should be, yeah, we've had the better car. And, Lando and Oscar have said that they've had the better car. They've also said that their car is trickier to drive than the Red Bull. And so at least it's tricky to drive, not necessarily trickier than the Red Bull. We know the Red Bull is very much tricky to drive compared to the Racing Bulls, for example. That at least seems to be the case. But there is no excuses, right, to not finish ahead of Max in this year's championship. And the idea of saying, oh, well, they've been quick already doesn't really sit right with many people, right? I mean, look at all the replies to this tweet, right? McLaren setting up the narrative in case they lose, Lando on diminishing others' era, and there's all this talk about Lando just because the season goes on, these comments keep coming out, right? It's like, come on, lock in, right? It just frustrates you a bit. Like, Piastri's just had this horrible weekends. This should be where Lando's coming out and saying, you know what, yeah, this championship's still mine to win. Max is 44 points behind me, not too worried about him. I'm looking forward. I'm looking at my championship rival. it's just not been like that. And Lando, when Lewis was dominating, was like, look, you've got the fastest car, you should be winning every race, you've just got to beat one driver. Clearly, it's not so simple as that. And, multiple of the replies here pretty much clowning Lando. But I think the other argument here is that even if Lando is to some degree right, maybe they have had a good car for a large part of the season, it doesn't mean that McLaren haven't still underperformed at times. Not just as a team, but also individually. There have been multiple weekends where mistakes have been made. And even when the Red Bull wasn't that good, for example, I'm looking at the overall championship this season. These are Max's results. He won in Japan. Was he the fastest car in Japan? No. But did he put together a qualifying lap when the McLaren guys didn't? Yeah, that's exactly what happened, right? He then started first, he managed it from there, and he was able to win the Grand Prix. The, Grand Prix in Imola, right? When he makes the first corner overtake against Piastri, the Piastri should really never have let happen, right? So there were plenty of moments where Max's wins didn't come from him having the fastest car. It came from mistakes from the McLaren guys. And then Monaco, certainly Spain. Spain, he wasn't that fast, and then he just, he crashed into George Russell, as we know, got the penalty. Canada, again, he scored a lot of points on a weekend where the McLaren wasn't as strong. Austria, then he got taken out of the Grand Prix, and then Britain he spun, but obviously the rear wing wasn't really there. And yeah, Verstappen's car has, it's not been terrible. Hungary was terrible, right? The car there was pretty atrocious. But look, if you look at Max Verstappen's points, he scored relatively okay. But even you look at the big scoring that he did get, a lot of that was at least in part because McLaren messed something up. Then, since the Netherlands, really, they've turned a clear corner, and now Max, over the last couple of rounds, has been able to deliver some serious results. But, usually you can tell how good the Red Bull is by looking at the other driver. And if you look at Yuki, when the car was good, or at least acceptable, he scored a handful of points. Then he went on a horrific run where he scored none at all. Some of those weren't all his fault, but largely it was. And then things have started to turn around. The Red Bull has definitely been good in qualifying. There's no doubt about that. But Piastri's average quali position this year is 2.5. Max's is 3.2. Norris's is 3.3, right? So, there isn't too much else really to say other than that, whatever happens for the rest of the season. I genuinely thought this season, as the championship went on and as Lando and Oscar did more battles for race victories, Lando would actually start to strike me as more of a feared competitor on the grids. But if anything, he's kind of proved the opposite, really. Whereas time has gone on, Max, and even to some extent George, and also Oscar, but, Baku was challenging. But, Max just keeps impressing me more and more by comparison. It's always difficult to say how good the Red Bull really is because, Max is Max. But, nonetheless, I don't think these comments from Lando really do him any favours. Maybe it's all part of his own kind of approach mentally to try and take some pressure off himself. But has that worked so far? I'm not so convinced. So intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. I will just share what Fred Vasseur has to say on the Grand Prix. I'm actually not going to read it. I'll let you read it if you want. I will, however, read this. Once again, the aim going into the weekend will be to maximise the potential. So here we go again. One thing they will have to fix, Ferrari, is, if you guys aren't aware, for the first 20 or so laps, I think, of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc was suffering heavily with a power unit deployment issue. So this is one of the reasons why he got overtaken more easily than he might have been expecting to. After he overtook Norris on the restart, which, I don't know, Norris fell asleep somehow, he then got re-overtaken, which was a little surprising, and large part of that was because his energy wasn't deploying properly, and then it magically fixed itself, and Ferrari, at least on the day, didn't know why. They have investigated this. Do they have an answer for it? I don't really know, but that's going to be a key one. Maybe not so much for Singapore. It's obviously not such a power-dependent circuit as Baku is, for example, but still going to be relevant if Ferrari want any chance to actually fight for the win. So intrigued to your thoughts in the comments as always. The last 15 Singapore Grand Prix, 14 of them have featured a safety car, which means that Bernd Mailander has actually led 94 laps around the Singapore Grand Prix circuit. Lewis Hamilton has led 249 laps around here. Vettel considered really the king of Singapore with a 252 lap stint. Maybe Hamilton, if he finds a way to lead a few more, can break that streak this weekend. But Max, we know, has led only 3 laps, right? So he's led a grand total of, what, near enough 32 times fewer laps than Bert Mylander has. But Lando Norris is the defending winner around this circuit. So very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.